Hello everyone, welcome back. Yesterday we were doing the directive principles of state policy. We saw what are the features of the DPSP. Then we looked at the three major classification of directive principles. We saw the difference between fundamental rights and directive principles. And we understood that fundamental rights are mostly negative in character, whereas DPSP is positive. Fundamental rights are like commands to the state, whereas DPSP is like guidelines for the state, which they have to keep in mind when framing laws and policies. Fundamental rights limit state actions, whereas DPSP is more like instrument of instructions. Then fundamental rights focus mainly on the individual, whereas DPSP is focused on the society. Fundamental rights, when I said it focused on the individual, yes, not all the fundamental rights are individual, but mostly. uh, then we saw that fundamental rights aim mainly at establishing political democracy, whereas directive principles aim at establishing social and economic democracy. So, and again, we saw that fundamental rights have a legal sanction, whereas directive principles have more of political and moral sanction. So, these were the major differences between fundamental rights and directive principles that we discussed yesterday. Now, coming to the implementation of directive principles. See, we know that directive principles are not justiciable in nature. So Article 37 of Indian Constitution makes directive principles of state policy fundamental in the governance of the country, and it says it shall be the duty of the state to apply these principles while making laws. So B.R. Ambedkar says if any government ignores them, they will certainly have to answer for them before the electorate at the time of election. So, every 5 years, the government is tested on this. So, this is like a litmus test for them. So, the real sanction behind directive principles is actually the public opinion, what the people feel about it. So, now the aim of directive principles are to establish a welfare state in India based on economic equality. So that is the reason why we have abolished all the institutions like zamindari system and all those things. And we have gone for uh, you know taxation based on income. So we have tried making tillers of the soil the real owners of the land. So these are all various measures aimed at establishing economic equality. So we have been trying to prevent the concentration of wealth in a few hands. And to implement many of these directive principles, the state have come up with various laws. The parliament has enacted various laws separately with the purpose of giving life or force or teeth to directive principles. See, for examples, if I can give you a few examples, untouchability. This was a old evil that we had in our society. So we have done away with it by making it a punishable offense. We have enacted a separate law for it, and we have enacted such separate laws for various other things. For example, promotion of cottage industries, for which we have an All India Khadi and Village Industries Board. Then we have Small Scale Industries Board. We have a separate silk board, so and so. And the government has also fixed minimum wages for workers through the Minimum Wages Act. We have improved the working conditions of workers. We have schemes like employment guarantee scheme. So the states are in a process of creating more and more jobs in the public sector, through which the poorer sections of the society are benefited. one classic example where we have materialized or enforced directive principle is the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992, because they added a third level of governance in the country. So yesterday we saw in one of the Gandhian principles that establishing village panchayats was one of the directive principles. So with this aim of giving effect to directive principle, we passed the 73rd and 74th Amendment Acts, under which we have the village panchayats and the nagar palikas. So now they have a constitutional status. And through 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002, we converted the subject of free and compulsory education to all children up to the age of 14 years into a fundamental right that we have seen already. Now, at the same time, see, on the one hand, the amendment gave a fundamental right to the children up to 14 years of age, that they may have free and compulsory education. So parallelly, it added a new fundamental duty also to the parents. Fundamental duty will be doing next. So that which means that it will be the fundamental duty of the parent to see that their ward is educated till they are 14. Now this was a move to give effect to the directive principles. So this is briefly about directive principles. That was a small chapter. Then we have a small section on fundamental duties. It's a very brief section on fundamental duties. So fundamental duties, this list of fundamental duties, they were not mentioned in the original constitution of the country, because for various reasons the framers or the makers of constitution never felt the need to have fundamental duties incorporated in the constitution. But later on it was included based on the recommendation of Swaran Singh Committee. So 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 added this list of fundamental duties to the Indian Constitution based on the recommendation of the Swaran Singh Committee. See, note here that the fundamental duties in the Indian Constitution, they are inspired by the Constitution of erstwhile USSR. And also notice that none of the constitutions of major democratic countries like the USA, Canada, France, Germany, Australia, and so on, they specifically contain a list of duties for the citizens, which means that these countries' constitutions do not have a list of fundamental duties for the citizens. So it says Japanese constitution is the only democratic constitution in the world to have a list of duties for the citizens. We have seen the constitution gives people the rights, and it also asks the state to provide the citizens through provide the citizens certain things through directive principles. And at the same time, the constitution is also asking us to fulfill certain duties as our fundamental duties. So this was added through the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976. Fundamental duties are contained in Part 4A of the Constitution. Part 4A of the Constitution, Article 51A. So this is basically a list of 10 duties. Though we have added, so today the list is of 11 duties, because in 2002 we have the Right to Education Act being implemented. So that added a fundamental duty to the list of duties. Just as I said now, it added a fundamental duty that the parents have to see to it that their ward is educated till they are 14. So basically fundamental rights are provided in the form of ideals or guidelines to the citizens. in their day to day affairs. So it is based on the principle that no democratic system can succeed unless rights and duties are properly coordinated. So, all your rights you have when you have certain responsibility. Okay, so enjoying the rights alone is not enough. When you have rights, it comes with responsibilities attached to it. So, those responsibilities are given in the form of your fundamental duties. So, rights and duties or rights and responsibilities go together hand in hand. Now, to read out a few of the fundamental duty that every citizen of India has to keep in mind: to abide by the constitution, respect its ideals and institutions, the national flag and national anthem, to cherish and follow noble ideals that inspired our struggle for freedom, to uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of India, to defend the country and render national service when called upon to do so, to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood, to value and preserve rich heritage of our country's composite culture, to protect and improve the natural environment including forests, lakes, rivers, wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures, to develop scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform, to safeguard public property and to abjure violence, to strive towards excellence in all spheres of individual and collective activity, to provide opportunities, see the latest addition to the list, to provide opportunities for education to his child or ward between the age of 6 and 14 years, and this duty was added by the 86th Amendment Act of 2002. Now, to note down a few features of the fundamental duties. First of all, see, some of them are moral duties while others are civic duties. For example, cherishing noble ideals of freedom struggle, that's more of a moral thing that you have to do. You have to do it on your own in your mind. Okay, this is more moral in nature. Whereas respecting the constitution, the national flag, and the national anthem is more of a civic duty. And again, they refer to such values which have been part of the Indian tradition, Indian tradition, mythology, religions, and practices. So, they contain those things that were already part of or integral to the Indian way of life. So these are things that are not these are not new to us. We are already we are already familiar with it because they are part of the Indian way of living. So unlike some of the fundamental rights which extend to all the persons, whether citizens or foreigners, fundamental duties are confined to citizens only, and we cannot expect the foreigners to have fundamental duty when they are in India. And again, like directive principles, fundamental duties are non-justiciable. So fundamental duties are non-justiciable, or you cannot go to a court saying that a person has not done a fundamental duty. See, there is no legal sanction against the violation of fundamental duty, but the parliament is free to enforce them by suitable legislation. The parliament feels that they have, we should have a separate law to give effect or to give life to any of these fundamental duties, then definitely you will be there will be legal sanction under that separate law. But as such, fundamental duties in itself, they are not enforceable. There is no legal sanction. Now, to look at some of the criticisms against fundamental duties. uh, the first criticism is that the list does not cover certain important duties like casting vote, paying taxes, family planning, etc. Next is that see some of the duties are vague or ambiguous, not very well defined, and it's not easy to be understood by common man. For example, terms like noble ideals, composite culture. See, for example, to cherish and follow the noble ideals that inspired our national struggle. So, how do you understand this term noble ideal? How does a common man, what does a common man uh, draw out of it? So, terms scientific temper. So, these are the terms that have might have different interpretations for different people. Now, again, another criticism is that they are more like a code of moral precepts because they are non-justiciable in character. So as long as they are non-justiciable in character, there is no legal sanction. So note here that the Swaran Singh committee actually suggested penalty or punishment for the non-performance of fundamental duties, but uh, you know the 42nd Amendment Act, when it was passed, it did not impose any punishment or penalty. So the non-justiciable character of fundamental duties is questionable. Again, their inclusion in the constitution was described by the critics as superfluous because the duties included in the constitution as fundamental would be performed by the people even though they were not incorporated in the constitution. See, we just saw that most of these values are integral to the Indian way of life and Indian way of living, and we have already seen that people are not really new to these concepts because, for example, to safeguard public property, abjure violence, respect your national anthem, these are the things that people would even otherwise do. Again, the last of the criticisms is that the inclusion of fundamental duties as an appendage to Article 4 of the Constitution has reduced their value and significance. We have actually added fundamental duties to Part 4 of the Constitution, right? It's not that we have made a separate part. For example, Part 3 talks about fundamental rights, Part 4 about directive principles, and Part 4a about fundamental duties. So we have actually added fundamental duties as an appendage to Part 4. People's critics say that instead of adding it to Part 4, we should have kept it as a separate part altogether so that fundamental duties get more relevance than what it has today. So basically, the idea behind having fundamental duties is that these are, based on your, self intelligence and not out of pressure or force. So basically, it will guide the people and present ideal for their behavior. So, according to Indira Gandhi, if we keep these fundamental duties in the mind, we would be able to find a peaceful, friendly revolution, she says. So whatever that be, we see, keep in mind that even when we say fundamental duties are non-justiciable, if the Parliament has passed a separate law to enforce or to give effect to any of these fundamental duties, then we are bound to obey it. See, for example, to safeguard public property and abjure violence, that's a fundamental duty. Or or rather to respect national flag and national anthem is a fundamental duty. Now we have separate laws under which if you do not respect national flag or anthem, or if you destroy public property or resort to violence, you will be punished under the law. So, this is all about fundamental duties. Okay, uh, one last thing, significance of fundamental duties. First of all, they serve as reminder to the citizens that while you enjoy your rights, you also have a list of duties and you should be aware of it. You owe something to your country, to your society, to your fellow citizens. Okay, so even while you enjoy your rights, you have duties towards your country, your society, and your fellow citizens. Now, another significance is that they serve as a warning against anti-national, anti-social activities like burning national flag, destroying public property, etc. And again, they serve as a source of inspiration for the citizens, and they promote a sense of discipline and commitment. They create a feeling that citizens are not mere spectators, but they are active participants in the realization of national goals. And then again, they help courts in examining and determining the constitutional validity of laws. For example, in 1992, the Supreme Court ruled that in determining the constitutional validity of a law, if a court finds that the law in question seeks to give effect to a fundamental duty, then it may consider such law to be reasonable in relation to Article 14 and Article 19. It simply means if when court examines the constitutional validity of any law, if the court finds that the law in question is actually giving effect to any of the fundamental duties, then it may consider such laws as valid. And again, another significance is that they are enforceable by law. Okay, so Parliament can provide for the imposition of appropriate penalty or punishment for failure to fulfill any of them. Just as I said, you cannot, to safeguard public property is uh, it's a fundamental duty for all citizens. So to enforce this, the Parliament has come up with a separate law altogether, under which if you destroy public property, you will be punished. So that way the Parliament can enforce it. So thank you all.